Imagine a company born in a garage, driven by two college dropouts. A company that was on the verge of bankruptcy, only to rise from the ashes and become the world's first $3 trillion empire. This isn't a movie script. It's the real story of Apple, a tale of passion, betrayal, genius, and a relentless pursuit of perfection. How did a simple idea to make technology personal transform our world? Let's rewind the clock and find out. It all starts in 1976, in the humble garage of Steve Jobs' parents in Los Altos, California. Here, two Steves, Jobs the visionary marketer and Steve Wozniak the engineering wizard, brought their revolutionary idea to life. Wozniak, who was working at Hewlett-Packard, had been tinkering with his own computer design for fun. He just wanted to show his friends at the Homebrew Computer Club what a clever design could do. But Jobs saw something more. He saw a product. He saw the future. To fund their new venture, Jobs sold his beloved Volkswagen van, and Wozniak, a bit more reluctantly, parted with his treasured HP 65 programmable calculator. With about $1,300, they started Apple Computer. Their first product, the Apple I, was essentially a motherboard. You had to provide your own keyboard, monitor, and even a case. It was as bare bones as it gets. But Jobs had a knack for marketing even then. He landed their first major order from Paul Terrell, the owner of the Byte Shop, one of the first personal computer stores. Terrell ordered 50 units, but on one condition: they had to be fully assembled. This pushed the two Steves from being hobbyists to being manufacturers overnight. They hand-built each of the 200 Apple I computers. The price? A quirky $666.66. Wozniak, who liked repeating digits, said it was just easier to type. It had nothing to do with anything sinister. It was simply 1/3 over their wholesale cost of $500. The Apple I was a modest success, but it proved their concept. It paved the way for the Apple II. Launched in 1977, the Apple II was a different beast altogether. It was the first truly personal computer for the masses. It came in a sleek, friendly-looking plastic case designed by Jobs, had a built-in keyboard, and could display color graphics, a huge deal at the time. This was Wozniak's masterpiece, a marvel of efficient engineering. This was also when Apple attracted its first major investor, Mike Markula, a retired Intel executive. He saw the potential, invested $250,000, and helped the young founders draft a proper business plan. Markula was the adult in the room, bringing professional management to the freewheeling startup. The Apple II became a runaway success, dominating the education market and putting Apple on the map. It sold for over 15 years in various forms, a testament to its brilliant design. By 1980, Apple went public, making its founders and early employees millionaires overnight. The garage felt like a distant memory. But as the 80s dawned, storm clouds were gathering. The company had grown, and with it, the internal politics. Tensions were rising between Steve Jobs and the board of directors, who saw him as brilliant but also volatile and difficult to manage. Apple was facing a new threat: IBM. The big blue giant entered the personal computer market in 1981, and its PC quickly became the industry standard. Apple, once the leader, was suddenly the underdog. Jobs' answer was the Macintosh. Introduced in 1984 with a now legendary Super Bowl commercial directed by Ridley Scott, the Macintosh promised to be the computer for the rest of us. It was a radical departure from the command line interfaces of the day. It had a mouse and a graphical user interface with windows and icons. It was intuitive, friendly, and empowering. It was the future of computing. The launch was a spectacle, classic Steve Jobs showmanship. He pulled the Mac from a bag, it booted up, and a synthesized voice said, "Hello, I am Macintosh. It sure is great to get out of that bag." The crowd went wild. However, the initial Macintosh was underpowered, expensive, and lacked software. Sales were disappointing. The company was split into factions: the Macintosh division, which was Jobs' personal fiefdom, and the Apple II division, which was still bringing in most of the revenue. The atmosphere became toxic. Jobs clashed with John Scully, the CEO he had famously recruited from Pepsi with the line, "Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life, or do you want to come with me and change the world?" The clash came to a head in 1985. After a failed boardroom coup by Jobs, the board sided with Scully. Steve Jobs, the charismatic co-founder, was stripped of his duties and effectively forced out of the very company he had created. He was just 30 years old. It was a brutal, public exile. He sold all but one of his Apple shares and went on to found two new companies. Next, which aimed to build high-end computers for education, and Pixar, a small computer graphics company he bought from George Lucas. Back at Apple, the post-Jobs era was a mixed bag. Without its visionary leader, the company drifted. They focused on maximizing profits from the Macintosh, raising prices, and creating a confusing product line. There were Macintoshes for every possible price point: the Performer, the Quadra, the Centris. It was a mess. Consumers were confused, and developers were frustrated. The company did have some technical innovations, but they were often poorly executed. The most infamous example was the Newton Message Pad, launched in 1993. It was a handheld device, a personal digital assistant, that predated the Palm Pilot and the smartphone. It was a visionary product, but the technology wasn't ready. Its most hyped feature, handwriting recognition, was notoriously unreliable, becoming the butt of jokes in TV shows and Doonesbury comics. The Newton was a commercial disaster and a symbol of Apple's decline. By the mid-90s, the company was in a death spiral, losing market share to the Wintel juggernaut of Microsoft Windows and Intel processors. Pundits were writing Apple's obituary. The company was reportedly just 90 days from bankruptcy. And then, in a stunning turn of events, Apple bought Next in 1996 for $429 million. It wasn't just about the technology, the sophisticated NEX step operating system that would become the foundation for Mac OS X. It was about the man. The deal brought Steve Jobs back to Apple, first as an advisor, and then, as the company's crisis deepened, as interim CEO. The prodigal son had returned. Jobs' return was electrifying. He wasted no time. At his first Macworld keynote as interim CEO, he famously declared that Apple would be taking money from its arch-rival, Microsoft. The crowd booed. But Jobs explained it was about getting out of a zero-sum game and focusing on great products. It was a strategic masterstroke that guaranteed Microsoft Office for the Mac and ended years of legal battles. He ruthlessly simplified the product line, killing dozens of projects, including the Newton. He drew a simple 4-quadrant grid on a whiteboard, a consumer desktop and portable, and a pro desktop and portable. That was it. This intense focus brought clarity back to the company. He re-energized the staff and brought back the iconic Think Different ad campaign, celebrating rebels and misfits, people like Apple itself. The first product of this new era was the iMac, launched in 1998. It was unlike any computer ever seen. It was a colorful, translucent, all-in-one machine. The Bondi blue design was fun, personal, and screamed, "I'm not a boring beige box." It had no floppy drive but was the first to embrace a new port called USB. It was a bold, risky move, and it paid off spectacularly. The iMac was a smash hit, saving Apple from the brink and making computers cool again. This marked the beginning of Apple's renaissance, a period of unprecedented innovation. The iBook, the iPod, the iTunes Store, and Mac OS X followed, each product building on the last, creating a powerful ecosystem of hardware, software, and services. Apple was back. But nothing could have prepared the world for what came next. On January 9, 2007, Steve Jobs walked onto the Macworld stage in his signature black mock turtleneck and jeans. The anticipation was palpable. He started by saying, "This is a day I've been looking forward to for 2.5 years." He then announced that Apple was introducing 3 revolutionary products: a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communications device. He repeated the list: an iPod, a phone, an internet communicator. The audience slowly caught on. Then he delivered the punchline: "Are you getting it? These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device, and we are calling it iPhone." The iPhone was a quantum leap. It put a real computer in your pocket. It had a multi-touch interface that felt like magic, a full web browser, and an operating system that was years ahead of anything else. It wasn't the first smartphone, but it was the first one that people actually lusted after. It completely redefined the mobile phone industry and set the stage for the mobile computing revolution. The following year, the launch of the App Store unlocked the iPhone's true potential, creating a brand new economy, and changing the way we work, play, communicate, and live. It was more than a product. It was a cultural phenomenon. It was the moment Apple went from being a computer company to being the company that defined the 21st century. Sadly, just 4 years after the triumph of the iPhone, Steve Jobs passed away in 2011 after a long battle with pancreatic cancer. His death sent shockwaves through the tech world and beyond. The question on everyone's mind was, could Apple survive without its visionary genius? The task of filling those enormous shoes fell to Tim Cook, Jobs' longtime lieutenant and the company's COO. Cook was not Steve Jobs. He was an operations genius, not a product visionary in the same mold. He was quiet, methodical, and data-driven. Many worried he lacked the creative spark that made Apple special. But Cook proved to be exactly what Apple needed for its next chapter. While Jobs was a master of creating revolutionary new product categories, Cook became the master of scale. He expertly managed Apple's complex global supply chain, ensuring that hundreds of millions of iPhones, iPads, and Macs could be produced with incredible quality and precision. He oversaw the refinement and perfection of the iPhone line, introducing different sizes and price points, making it a truly global product. He also launched entirely new product categories that have become massive businesses in their own right: the Apple Watch, which now dominates the watch industry, and AirPods, which created the entire category of wireless earbuds. Perhaps most significantly, Cook orchestrated Apple's massive pivot towards services. Under his leadership, Apple launched Apple Music, Apple TV+, Apple Arcade, and iCloud, creating a recurring revenue stream that makes the company less dependent on iPhone sales. This ecosystem locks users in and has been a huge driver of Apple's growth. In August 2018, Apple became the first public US company to be valued at $1 trillion. Just 2 years later, it hit $2 trillion. And in January 2022, it briefly touched the $3 trillion mark. From a garage to the world's most valuable company. It's a story of innovation, design, and a relentless focus on the user experience. But as we look to the future, with new frontiers like augmented reality and maybe even an Apple Car on the horizon, the core philosophy remains the same. It's about making technology that is not just powerful, but personal, intuitive, and beautiful. It's about making tools that empower people to do great things. That was the original dream in that California garage, and it's the legacy that continues to drive Apple forward. What do you think will be Apple's next big thing? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.